Hello, everyone, and welcome to our latest edition of BookTrib Live, a Merrill Moss Media production. Today, we're thrilled to chat with Allan Topol, an internationally best-selling thriller author who's here to talk about his new book, The Italian Divide. This is Allan's 12th novel of international intrigue, and several of his past books have been optioned for movies. He's also a partner in a major Washington, D.C. law firm and is an avid world traveler. Thanks so much for joining us today, Allan.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks a whole lot for having me, Katie. Delighted to be here.
We're really happy to have you. So before we start with our questions, can you bring us up to speed on The Italian Divide by giving us some background on the story for some of our viewers who might not have had the chance to read it yet?
Sure, absolutely. As you indicated, this is my 12th novel, and what I do is I write geopolitical thrillers, but I have a little bit of a niche in my books because on the one hand, they're meant to be entertaining page-turners, fast-moving action books, but on the other hand, they're meant to have some intellectual content. And I want the reader not only to say, gee, I enjoyed that book and I came away from it. It was a lot of fun. It was entertaining. But I want the reader to come away having learned something about some geopolitical issue in the world or issues. And in the case of The Italian Divide, on the action suspense level, my heroes, I should say, Craig and Elizabeth, are crisscrossing exotic Italy. What sets them off on their journey, so to speak, is the murder of an Italian banker who happened to be the benefactor of Craig, who's racing cars. But along the way, they become involved not just in the murder of this banker, but in Italian politics and in Chinese spies. And at the heart of the book, of this page-turning story, are a couple of serious political issues. One is, and it's a contemporary novel, of course, but one is the current political situation in Italy and the conflict between northern Italy and southern Italy, which is why the book's called The Italian Divide. And the other geopolitical issue involved in the book is the Chinese efforts to gain a foothold in Europe, in Western Europe, and they're doing it by takeovers of Italian banks. So at the heart of the book, it's Italy, it's history, it's politics, Chinese efforts to go into the Italian country as well.
Great. That's really, really interesting. And the book is really, really thrilling. In addition to really kind of educational, I felt like I was learning a lot about banking as I was reading it. And one of the things that I wanted to ask right off the bat is how difficult was it for you to sort of marry those two topics? Because when you think of, super spy thrillers, the first thing that you think of isn't necessarily international banking. So how was that for you writing it? Was it difficult or was it, par for the course for you?
No, well, it was sort of par for the course to find a subject and merge it together. But what I had to do, which really made it kind of fun and interesting, when I proposed the topic to my editor, he says, gee, I don't know, banking, a lot of people might not be interested in banking. That's kind of a dry topic. And I said, believe me, I am not going to go into any of the details of banking. I mean, we have a pretty simple operation here in terms of banking. My hero, Craig Page, has gotten out of the espionage business at the beginning of the novel. He's racing cars and doing very, very well in relay races. And then his benefactor, because he needs a benefactor, it costs a lot of money to do this sport. And so his benefactor is a banker based in Milan, and his benefactor is murdered. And the only thing you need to know about banking is that the Chinese are trying to gain a foothold by taking over Italian banks. Now, once we've sort of said that, we're into banking and kind of all the banking you need. But the fun part of the book, and your question is a terrific question, the fun part of the book for me in writing it was to merge those various topics, to merge Italian history, Italian politics, and Chinese efforts to get into the Italian economy by way of banking. That was the part in plot construction that was really, really fun. Because, you read a book and it's a murder and it can be well written. It's interesting who did it and so forth. But I wanted to do much more than that. I wanted to educate about Italy, its history, its current politics, Chinese efforts. I wanted to weave all those things together and still make it a Craig Page and Elizabeth Crowder, because those are my two heroes for this book.
Yeah, I mean, and jumping off of that, I wanted to ask, just because these novels have a really authentic feel to them, both in your description of the locations, and you're discussing the way you were planning the book. And I noticed that every chapter is sort of opened with a location, and it's told story by story and perspective by perspective by location. And I know you're a world traveler, and I wanted to ask, how many of the places in the book have you actually visited? Because some of the descriptions are amazing, and I was like, oh my God, this is really authentic. So how many of the places have you visited, and which one was your favorite, if you've been to all of them?
Oh, that's a great question. What happened with this book, I first took a trip to Italy for a vacation a number of years ago with my wife. I wasn't planning to write a book that involved Italy at all. I was coming off a book in the Middle East, but I was really enamored with the country. It's a fascinating place of what I saw, people we talked with, of its politics, not just the food and the wine, but yes, the food and the wine.
And you talk about
so with those things, I started talking to people, and I began doing research. And then we made 3 or 4, actually 4 more trips back for research. Then I'm taking notes, and I'm doing research at home on the internet and in the library. And all of the places in the novel were places that I've actually visited and been.
Wow.
I've eaten in all the restaurants, I've stayed at all the hotels, I've drunk all the wines, and I've seen those sites. I mean, at places like Orta or Stresa. And so, in a certain sense, while my book's meant to be a fun, entertaining read, for those of the readers who have gone and visited Italy, I think it'll bring back memories for them of places they've been and seen. And for people who haven't ever taken a trip to Italy or considering one or would like to one day, almost it can be a vicarious trip when you read the book. But here's the secret, is for me, at least in writing, is to give enough description to make the place seem interested and intriguing. And that means less is more. It means a couple of paragraphs at most. What I don't like as a reader is to go on paragraph after paragraph or page after page of description of a place or its history or what happened here, and then in 1620 there was a battle about this or that, because those are parts of a book that I skim. And so that's my sort of technique. Less is more. How do you get a couple succinct, good descriptive paragraphs that'll let the reader feel that he or she is in that place? And I work hard at that because I think that's really important.
Yeah, I agree, and I think you certainly achieved that. And if anything, I got done with the book and I was just sitting there thinking, gosh, I got to get to Italy, which was kind of weird for me.
Well, that's the right.
Now I really want to go there. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be amazing, but I got to watch out for spies. But it was a pretty great part of the novel and one of my favorite aspects of it. But earlier you had mentioned your main characters, obviously Craig and Elizabeth. And I wanted to ask if there are any sort of real life people that you might have been inspired by as you were sort of constructing their characters. I know you've written several books about them in the past, but is there any real life inspiration behind them, or are they just people that you've imagined out of your mind?
Well, it's kind of a imagination, but with writing, and I'm sure you've heard this from other writers, we create our characters with the composites of people that we've met and we've gotten to know over the years. Now, my own life, while I've written these 12 novels, I've been a lawyer in Washington with a large Washington law firm. But along the way, I've been researching and writing my novels, and in doing so, I have met quite a few people, and I've sought out from the intelligence community, not just people from U.S. intelligence, but people from foreign governments who are with their intelligence organizations. I've sought them out. I've spent time with them. I've spoken with them. Some have very nicely and graciously read drafts of my books to make sure that it's authentic and correct on authenticity. As far as creating Craig, one interviewer said to me a little while ago, and it made me stop and think, and it's probably right. He said, I think, Allan, that Craig Page is your fantasy character. He's what you would like to be doing in your life, that you don't want to be just a lawyer and a writer, that you'd love to be out there as a spy doing these counter-terrorist things, that you would like to be working ahead and doing these things, and you'd love to be racing cars in the mountains of Italy. And And since you're not doing it, you're living vicariously through Craig Page. And it made me think for a while, and I kind of decided, gee, that interviewer had a point, and perhaps he did. The other thing about Craig and my creation of Craig, which is really important, is that he was having a successful career with the CIA. But Craig is somebody who couldn't tolerate the Washington bureaucracy. And I got to know a lot about Washington bureaucracy. And it's because he couldn't tolerate the bureaucracy, he had a very successful, managed to thwart a bombing attack at Madison Square Garden. But because he didn't dot the I's and cross the T's, he ended up being disciplined, even though he was successful. And that was it. He walked away. He said, I'm not doing it anymore. I'm not going to deal with the bureaucracy. And yet he gets brought in to different assignments. Now, one point worth making, let me pause on Craig, then I want to talk about Elizabeth. But on Craig, it's terribly important, and Elizabeth too. I have put these characters, in 5 novels, but I have tried mightily. I haven't just tried. My agent has beat me up about it. Each book must be a stand-alone book. Anybody can pick up The Italian Divide and not have read the earlier Craig Page books and not miss a thing. And that's really, really important because you can't expect readers. On the other hand, for readers who have read other Craig Page books, there has to be a natural evolution in the character. And so that's really important. And that's what I've tried to do with him. Now, with Elizabeth, my objective, and Craig, and I think this is really important, just one more thing about Craig. Yes, Craig's the protagonist. He's the hero of this book and other books. But Craig is not perfect. And I think that's really important. I don't want to create a perfect hero. I don't want to create a flawless individual because in the real life, people aren't like that. And he'll fly off the handle and he'll do things that aren't the right thing to do under a circumstance. And he'll be motivated sometimes by emotion. And I think those things are important. Elizabeth Crowder, who has been Craig's romantic interest and sort of counterpoint for the Craig Page novels, is a newspaper reporter. And he meets her in the first book after his daughter has been murdered, and she was, as a newspaper editor, was his daughter's boss at the time. And Elizabeth is from New York City. Her father and 3 of her brothers were with New York PD, New York Police Department. She's sort of gutsy, powerful character. Played baseball on the men's baseball team in school. She was a pitcher and very good marksman and an interesting, strong character in her own right. And for me, that's kind of important because I have 3 daughters who are doing powerful, strong things on their own. And I wanted to create, powerful wife too, I wanted to create a female character who would be a strong character in and of herself. I didn't want to create somebody that would just be Craig's love interest. And Elizabeth plays a critical role in all of the Craig Page books, as she does in this book. And she's not just a patsy who will go along with what Craig says. And I want their interaction to be something that readers will come to appreciate because I want it to be a realistic, real interaction that she's just not going to be dominated by Craig. And so their relationship then adds an additional element to the book, or at least I try to make it that.
Oh, it certainly does. And of all the characters in the book, and there are many, Elizabeth was my favorite because she was really strong and she didn't always kind of do what people suggested because she's a reporter, not necessarily a spy herself, but she still puts herself out there on several occasions, not to spoil anything in the book. So yeah, I really loved her character, and I'm really glad that you kind of expanded on her. I have one other question that really intrigued me about the novel. It's a specific plot point that you've mentioned several times, that Craig was a race car driver at the beginning of this book. And for some of our viewers who might not know, after he left the CIA, he went to go race cars in Italy, but also underwent drastic plastic surgery to sort of hide his identity because he didn't want to be recognized because he's kind of hiding out to a certain extent. And I wanted to ask you about that idea. Where did that concept of having drastic plastic surgery come from? Because it's kind of a unique idea. And I was telling somebody about the book that I was reading, and I was like, yeah, he got plastic surgery. And they're like, well, that's kind of strange. And I was like, no, but it's cool. It's not like, someone mentioned to me like the movie Face Off, and I was like, no, this is like a serious thing in the book, and it's really interesting. So I wanted to ask you, where did you get that idea? Because it's really unique.
Well, it's a great question, because this is one of the things that that writers struggle with, because before he underwent the plastic surgery, Craig had really managed to thwart a plot by a Chinese industrialist, and he knew that Chinese industrialist would be coming after him. And he also decided to break with the law enforcement agencies. In fact, he ended up being fired from his position at the time with the law enforcement agencies. And I thought, how Craig, operating on his own, will be really in trouble and just being chased by this Chinese industrialist. I didn't want that. And also, I thought it would be neat to kind of give Craig a little bit of a different physical identity. It would make him a more interesting character. And then I thought, what's he want to do? He wants to do something. He's decided, that's it. I'm finished with espionage. I'm finished with law enforcement. I have a new identity. The Chinese industrialist isn't going to find me. So what am I going to do? I'm not going to go to the beach and just sit around at the beach. And for Craig, something he always wanted to do, and I'll get in a minute how I got to that, something Craig always wanted to do was race cars. Now, I don't mean like the Indianapolis 500 where you're going around a track, but there's something called rally racing. And what happens, it's done often in hilly, mountainous parts of the world, Australia or Europe, the Alps, in which roads are blocked off, and then drivers drive cars, sometimes for 2 or 3 days at a time, and they're racing against the clock, as it is in this book. And the one with the shortest time, of course, wins the race. Now, it's kind of funny how I got into this and interested in it, because it kind of shows what the writing process is. It's coincidence, really. Is we were visiting some friends once who had a house, a summer house, up in Nantucket. We're up in Nantucket and talking with this fellow who's from Australia about what he does. And he says, well, he's really kind of inherited, he's involved in a car business in Australia, but he also, besides buying and selling cars, the dealership is, he loves cars and he races cars and rally races. And I said, well, what do you mean? What do you do? And he said, then he produced that evening a video of one of the races, and I was hooked. So I'm peppering him with questions. He's feeding me technical information. And I thought, this is neat, because it's an activity that not many people are familiar with. It gives Craig something different to do, but yet it fits with the Craig character, because as his navigator, there are two in a car, the driver and the navigator, as his navigator says to him in an earlier book, when the car crashes, he tells Craig, you have a death wish. And the way Craig drives the car in these races, I think, is indicative of Craig's character, that he does have sort of a recklessness and a reckless streak about him. And so it worked together with the Craig Page character. But it is kind of interesting as odd coincidences happen in life, things you come across as you're thinking about a book and a character, and those become the items that authors will use in books, or at least I do, and I'm sure others do as well.
That's really interesting. I'd never thought about the way that, because he does drive rather recklessly, and the book opens with he's having a conversation with Luigi, I think is the name of his navigator, and he wants to take it slow and steady, but Craig wants to drive really fast, and he's just going to go for it. And I never considered that sort of dangerous element is really informative towards his character. Wow, thank you for that insight. That's pretty great.
Well, it does, and and it raises something else besides the recklessness. And as you said, to come back to that initial scene, because action is really character. There's another part to him too that's kind of universal in sports at the scene that you're referring to. He's the leader of the race at this point. There's one more day to go. And the question is, how should he play it from there? Should he play it safe, or should he really kind of go all out the last day, figuring that the other riders behind him may catch up? And that's a question that all people have in sports. If you're leading a golf match and you're sitting in the middle of the fairway, do you play it safe, even though and avoid the bunker and figure you'll go up on the green in the next shot, or do you go for broke and you go for the green? And it doesn't matter, football, baseball, it's all the same thing. That you come, when you're in the lead, you come to those questions. And I think how one plays that question says something about character. And here it does, of course, in Craig's case, because he's not going to lay it. He's going for broke. He's going for the hole, so to speak, in the racing.
The whole book, not just in that specific instance, but the whole book, he's just trying to capture Zhou. And it's just, it's a great insight. So yeah, thank you for that. But I want to pull up a question from one of our viewers. And it is this question right here from Brian. What would be your advice to people who want to become an author? And I'm putting this up there now because you've just been talking about, character and how you clearly think so thoroughly about these characters. So, what would you tell someone who wanted to be a thriller author, respectively? Or even branching off of this, when did you know you wanted to be a writer, and how did you first get into it? And by the way, great question, Brian. Thank you for that.
Sure, it is a good question. What would my advice be to people who want to become an author? The first thing I'd say is you have to be really committed to the process. You don't have to take writing courses or go to the University of Iowa or this or that. You have to be committed to the process. It's going to be a tough road, but you have to say to yourself, first, get an idea in your head. And when you have that idea, an idea that you can reduce to 3 sentences, you have an idea for a story. We call it the elevator pitch. Get your story down to 3 sentences. That's your story. Then I do 2 things. First of all, I like to lay out an outline for my book. 40 or 50 pages. Now, when I write the book, I'm not going to stick precisely to that outline. I'm going to change it as it goes and as the action goes. But I start with that because I want to know where I am. I want to know where I'm going. The second thing I do is I write each of my characters. I will make character descriptions detailed of my 3 or 4 major characters so that I get to know them. I'll write out their biographies, what they're like, what their characteristics are. Some of this I'll use in the novel, some I won't. But I have to get to know the characters. The other suggestion I have is the technique that I have of writing, which a number of other thriller writers have, is I'll pick 3 or 4 point of view characters, and I will shift the scenes from their points of view. And that's my way of having the story unfold. So we have a scene from Craig's point of view, a scene from Elizabeth's point of view, a scene from the point of view of an Italian banker, and that lets my readers get to know the characters and lets the story unfold. The other bit of advice I would have in answer to your question is, and don't laugh, but my advice is, do not quit your day job.
Sorry, you said not to
be author. No, I'm really quite serious because writing is tremendous fun. I enjoy it, and I've been very successful. But the economics of the writing business these days, particularly with fiction writing, it's not terribly remunerative. Even if one of your books does well, or a couple of books, you have to keep going, book after book. And if you keep your day job, you don't have the pressure on you. And also, you don't have the pressure of looking at a blank page every morning. It's much better to let the ideas work around in your mind, make time, early mornings, weekends, whatever, I just think it's a much better way to work. So that would be my answer to the question of your listener.
Oh, great. That was a really good answer. And I like that ending tilt because that kind of brings me to another question that I had that's just kind of like a interpersonal question. But first, I just want to say thanks, Brian, for that question. That was great. So thank you. But anyway, just jumping off that last point that you made, what do you like better, your day job, being a lawyer, or do you like writing better? It sounds like you love writing a little bit more, but I mean, earlier you
Oh, I do love writing more. And what happened was I wrote 2 novels, and at that point in my life, and they were very successful, but at that point in my life, we had 4 children, and I found that there were things I wanted to do in life. I wanted to be a husband and a father to my family. I wanted to be a lawyer, and I wanted to be a writer, and I found I could do 2 of those 3 things successfully, but not all 3. So I stopped the writing process for about 18 or 19 years and was father and husband and lawyer and earning an income and supporting my children. And then the last child went off to college and was out of the house. And at that point, yippee, it was time to go back to writing with a much, much bigger kind of time. And then something else happened the last couple of years, since my law firm, like most law firms, have a situation in which when lawyers have been practicing for a while, they kind of have to taper down in a senior counsel mode. And so that freed up more time for me too. So at this point, although I'm still doing law and writing, the balance of time has changed, and the law is a relatively small part of my time, and the writing is a much, much bigger part of my time. And I'm thoroughly enjoying it and enjoying the traveling that goes with my kind of writing, as you know.
Wow, I love that reaction to the last kid is out of the house, yay, which is, I think, different than how my parents felt when I left the house because I was the youngest one. But still, that's pretty funny. Actually, I wanted to ask you one other question. And it's something that I'm kind of interested in because I know that many of your novels are sort of international. And a lot of what I've noticed about some of the last ones, I haven't read all of them, but they seem to be pretty ahead of the curve on several, geopolitical issues. And, past books have incorporated, Russian-American relations and also radical Islam in Europe. They're both very salient issues today, obviously. So I just wanted to ask you, what's your take on everything that's been going on recently? Are you
Well, I must say, I'm not surprised by what's been happening because the 2 of the major issues that are going on in the world, the 2 you identify now, radical Islam in Europe and growth of Russia, are issues that I dealt with in my books, which came out within the last 6 years. I mean, the topic of radical Islam and the conflict between Christianity and Islam in Western Europe was the subject of my book, The Spanish Revenge, where a Muslim group of Muslim terrorists has this plan to retake Spain and part of France from the Christians, who they say took it from them in 1492. And so that topic was explored in my book, which came out about 5 years ago. And now, unfortunately, it's happening in Western Europe. The other issue is the emergence of Russia back on the world stage is something that I laid out in my book, The Russian Endgame, which came out 4 years ago. And in that book, I envision a Russian president who was behaving a lot like Putin's behaving now. And so the events are unfolding kind of as they're predicted in the Russian Endgame. And unfortunately, it's not that I'm such an astute observer or I'm clairvoyant. I mean, if one studies and follows and has read international affairs the way I do, kind of copiously, these 2 developments seemed very, very clear they were going to happen. Now, why others in a decision-making capacity weren't focused on them, why they're surprised, that I don't know. But I try in my books to focus on issues that are coming and sort of hit them first. Chinese investing in Italy and the Italian divide is one. I mean, so I try to get into these issues kind of early on. Divisions in Italy between North and South. just starting to happen. And this is the fodder for my books, actually.
Still there?
Yep, I'm here. You here?
Oh yeah, sorry about that. Right.
Hear me okay?
Yeah, I heard pretty much all of that except the very last, like the last sentence of what you said. You just broke up for a split second, but that's okay. Do you mind repeating that?
Yeah, no. When I lost you, my thought was what's happening in the world. That's really what I use as the basis to pull my novels together. And I build them on world events. And so I take a geopolitical issue and I say, I'm going to write a story around it, a good action page turning story. And the reader will end up having the issue fleshed out.
Yeah, and I think that's why they feel so authentic. I mean, at least this adventure, I was reading it, and not only did it make me want to go to Italy, but I felt like I was learning something, and I don't know, it felt real. And I think that pulling things from current events, and what I think you have been describing is that you have an eerily accurate way of predicting things that are going to be happening. I think that it's a really great way to be structuring a story. So yeah, thank you so much for that.
Well, you know, Katie, what I love about the comment you just made, one thing I felt really good about this book is it's been read by some people in the Italian-American press and editors and so forth of magazines and periodicals. And they have come back with a very, very positive view of the book, of it being authentic. And this I felt very good about because I don't have Italian background. I haven't lived there. It's obviously a challenge to describe someone else's country, politics, and culture. But getting a sort of a stamp of approval from these people has made me feel very, very good that I do have something that's authentic, and it's really working. I feel good about that.
Oh, that's really great. I'm glad that you feel good about the fact that you accurately portrayed something that you maybe didn't know like innately because you're not from there. But anyway, I am going to wrap this interview up. Unfortunately, we've come to the end of our time with Allan, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and Allan, thanks so much for answering all of our questions. Hopefully we can do it again soon, hopefully with the next Craig Page adventure, because I'd love to read the next one. Yeah, thank you, everybody, and have a great day.
Bye-bye. Thanks.